Hello guys and gals, and this is part 4 of our reading of Pandora's Genes. It is a novel by Kathryn Lance and part of a trilogy, actually. I still need to look up what the other 2 books in the trilogy are, but they all start with Pandora's, so I will get right on that. Anyways, also, this book is probably still for sale. I believe it'll have a different cover, though. This is an original 1985 copy of the book, but later copies had a different cover. So, anyways, yeah, you might want to check that out, or go to your local library and check out a copy for yourself. That way, if you want to read ahead, you can. Anyways, we're going to go over the copyright information, and I will say that we will be going over the copyright information, but I do have the author's permission to read this on my channel. So, it says copyright here, copyright 1985 by Kathryn Lance. So, we are ready to go. I believe so. And in the last episode, Zach got stung, or bitten, rather, by a green fly. And unlike the green flies we have in this universe, this green fly gave him a kind of flu that incapacitated him. If it wasn't for Evie, I believe that's the way her name is pronounced, then he would have died. And then I don't know what they would do. But anyway, he recovered, and they were staying in a cave, and now there is apparently a bat. One of the bad kind of bats that, like, has a toxic sting. So anyways, we're going to see what happens. Let's go. There we go. Evie, he whispered urgently, get under my cloak. Cover yourself completely. Now, he added as she hesitated. Evie burrowed under his cloak while Zach moved towards the mouth of the cave. Why had he decided to sleep so far from the fire? As he moved, trying not to make a sound, he remembered that his sword still lay with his blanket and bundles. Small matter. The only weapon really useful against a bat was light. He had nearly reached the small pile of unburned wood when the bat sensed him and dived at him. He rolled towards the fire quickly, knowing the beast could not follow, and put his hand on the first piece of wood he came to. He cried out. His hand had closed on a burning ember. Ouch. That would hurt. Zach! It was Evie, frightened by his cry. I'm all right, he shouted. Stay covered. He heard the enraged bat whirring just beyond the circle of light. Two long branches were burning just at their ends. He took them, one in each hand, and crouched, steadying himself, and began to move towards the bat. The animal screamed in pain as the glow of the fire reached it, and pounded its wings furiously, trying to get away. Zach beat at it with the branches. In his panic, the bat veered into the wall and then began flying wildly in circles. Reaching out with its long talons, Zach tried to herd it towards the hole at the top of the cave, but the animal was quicker than he, and he retreated toward the fire to give it a chance to calm down. The bat, however, was in a frenzy, and suddenly it flew directly towards Evie, still bundled under Zach's cloak. Don't move, he called. No matter what happens, no matter what you feel, don't move. Then the bat, in its crazed flight, brushed the edge of the cloak, catching it in its talons. Evie screamed as she felt the cloak being pulled from her. But the bat thrashed desperately in its struggle to get free. Instantly, Zach crossed the cave and pulled the cloak completely away from the girl. The coarse wool had wrapped itself around the bat's claw. Zach heard the ripping noise as the bat continued to struggle. He laid down the burning branch and picked up a large limb that lay in the corner and began to beat at the trapped animal. The bat made its eerie sound for a moment more, then fell silent and unmoving. To make certain, Zach approached it with a burning branch, holding the fire near the now staring eyes. There was no reaction. It's dead, he said, his voice sounding strange and hollow. Evie, did it hurt you? The girl threw her arms around him, trembling with sobs. It's all right, he said awkwardly, patting her shoulder with his burnt hand. It's over now. Everything's all right. He continued to comfort her for a moment. When her sobs had subsided, he gently held her away Let's go back to sleep, he said. What about the bats? There won't be any more, he said, hoping it was the truth. This fellow just wandered in by mistake. But to be sure we're safe, I'll put more wood on the fire, and we'll sleep next to it. What about your cloak? Asked Evie. Zack eyed the rough woolen garment and considered. It was torn and bloody, with the dead bat lying twisted in its folds. He didn't want to risk a scratch from the still poisoned talons. I'll clean it tomorrow, he said. You can sleep with me under my cloak, said Evie. Thank you. I have my blanket, and I'll be warm enough by the fire. Please, she added. I'm so frightened. Evie's little cloak was scarcely large enough to cover her, but Zack lay beside her, spreading the wool over both of them. The girl shivered and wriggled close to him. Am I hurting your arm? She asked. It's pinched just a little, said Zack. He moved it and found that it was best to let his arm fall over her in a protecting but far more intimate position than he had intended. Well, he thought, let it be. I will hold her as I would hold my own daughter. Evie soon fell asleep, breathing deeply, but Zack found that despite his exhaustion, he could not relax. He told himself that it was because of the need to stay alert in case another bat should wander into the cave. His body told him that it was more, and at last he began to understand why the principal had risked so much to send him on this mission. Chapter 5. On each succeeding day, Zack felt stronger, and each day... On each succeeding day, Zack felt stronger, and each day they traveled farther than the last, though still more slowly than necessary. They were well out of Bat Country now, approaching the river crossing, and Zack would have to make a decision soon. Evie often chattered as they rode, commenting on the scenery, questioning Zack about his life. Although Zack was accustomed to traveling alone, he found that he enjoyed her company. Tell me about the capital, she asked one day. Where shall I begin? What is it like to live there? Zack mused. There was no way he could possibly convey to Evie the confusion and bustle that was the capital. The sense of continuity with the pre-change past provided by the many old buildings and monuments still standing. To many, as it once had to Zack, the capital represented a dream of what had been in the past and was still possible. Lining the broad, decaying, pre-change avenues were shops, taverns, and houses of women or boys for hire. There were literacy centers, encouraged by the principal, and theaters for entertainments of all sorts. Still standing were many old museums from the past, some holding books, other repositories for ancient weapons, used now by the principal's army. Living in and around the vast mall were merchants, technicians, and craftsmen, trying to relearn the simple technologies of the past, as well as poets, dreamers, and scoundrels of every variety. Here, too, congregated soldiers, farmers, and simple folk like Evie's family. Families with 2 or more husbands and a wife and children for those in the principal service. The capital provided a life of such comfort as was still possible in exchange for loyalty and obedience and the willingness to share the principal's own dreams and risk one's life for them. Zack thought again of how to answer Evie's question. Your second father told me you once lived in a town, he finally said. What was that like? I was a little child then, said Evie. She sounded thoughtful. My first father was a fur trader. We had a big store in... I remember the cabin and lots of people. Too many people and bad smells. Zack smiled. Well, that's just what the capital is like, only much bigger. There are people, animals, dirt, and noise everywhere. It sounds wonderful. He laughed. It is true. There are old buildings a mile high. Oh, is it true? There are buildings a mile high? Not a mile, very tall. Do people live in them? In the bottom parts, some of them. Some are just ruins, and no one can live there. In the top parts, no one lives. At least no one who doesn't have a reason to hide. It takes too long to climb up there. Why were they built so tall then? Before the change, there were machines to carry people to the top. How? We can't really know. But there were machines to do nearly everything, Evie. I'm sure you've heard that. Life must have been good in those days, the girl said after a moment. They had their problems, just as we have ours, said Zack. When I get to the capital, I'm going to climb to the top of the tallest building I can find, Evie said. Zack didn't answer. Evie seemed to have forgotten that she was on this journey against her will. Zack? Yes, Evie. What's the principal like? He's a man like other men. I've answered enough questions now. Let's ride. Evie didn't seem to notice that Zack was keeping each day's journey short, although he felt well to let her think he was still suffering the effects of fly fever. Inevitably, however, the morning of decision came. They had finished breakfast on the remains of a large snake Zack had caught, and Evie was gathering their things into bundles to tie on the mount. Zack watched her a moment, then spoke. Stop, he said, and turned around surprised. We're going to leave some things here. She started to speak, then fell silent, looking bewildered. Zack took stock of the things they had on hand. Very little food. They were living off the land. The drinking horn, his large pouch, his small personal pouch, and drinking skin, 2 ragged blankets, Evie's own small bag, and the clothes that they were wearing. Not much. His pipe, well, he could do without that, and another would be easy to make. Likewise, his leather pouches. As for the feathered lyre, they were so rare and costly that he could never hope to buy another one. Still, if he wanted his plan to succeed, he must make it as convincing as possible. Let's see what you have in your bag, he said. She hesitated, then turned the contents of the bag onto the ground. There are 3 hard green fruits, a comb made out of carved bone, a necklace of dried seeds colored purple, and a small dilapidated doll made of rags and twine. As soon as he saw them, Zack wanted her to tell her to put everything away, but he needed some evidence that she had been here too. May I have the comb? He asked for a moment. Without a word, she handed the object over. You can put the other things back, he said. And those with them, he added, handing her his flint and metal. He took the comb and the pouch containing his pipe and new smoke and dropped them by the fire. His larger bag he ripped open and shoved into the brush. What are you doing? Evie sounded frightened. Zack didn't answer. He kicked the still smoldering campfire, scattering coals and stones. With his knife, he gouged the bark of a young tree and broke off several of its branches. He would keep the sword and bow, of course. All weapons were so valuable that none would be left anywhere for long. He thought for a moment to hunt for a small animal and its blood, but it might take more than a day, and he had become very aware of the time that had passed since his journey began. Even now, there might be a search party on his trail. He stood back and looked around the now ruined campsite. Although the evidence did not necessarily indicate a struggle, it would appear obvious that something unusual had occurred here. Then realized that the man-made objects might be picked up by anyone. He took them one by one and scattered them nearby, each partially hidden by rocks or dry leaves. As a final touch, he took his feathered lyre and placed it in its protective case just under the overhanging edge of a large rock. Upstream from the camp, it would not be readily visible to anyone who was not carefully searching the area. And if he were able someday to retrieve it, it would then at least be partially protected from the worst weather. Come on, let's go, he said. Evie looked distressed, but not saying anything, followed him to the mount and let herself be lifted onto it. They had ridden a short distance when she spoke. We're going back the way we came yesterday. That's right, said Zack. And we'll ride in the water for a while. Get ready for some splashing. He guided the mount down into the shallow edge of the river and turned her upstream. Now that it had been done, he felt curiously free. At last, the crossing place came into view, and Zack guided his mount out of the water and onto the pre-change roadway, which was now a mixture of weeds, powdered white rock, and occasional brownish clumps of rotting metal. Where are we? Asked Evie, who hadn't spoken in all this time. This is known as the Northern Ford, said Zack. It's an ancient pre-change bridge made possible by the principal's men. The ancient stone pilings supported long wooden boards, carefully hid and secured with thick bark ropes. We'll have to get off and walk across. You go first, and I'll follow with the mount. Evie looked frightened, but didn't protest. And soon she was across. Zack followed her, the mount behind him. On the other side, he looked back across the river. Goodbye, Will, he thought. They had ridden in silence for perhaps 2 hours when Evie finally spoke again. Someone's following us. That's why you did that, isn't it? Yes, he said. It was close enough to the truth. Are we going to go back for your things? I hope so, said Zack, but not for a while. She was silent again. He could see that she was thinking, trying in her mind the various reasons why he might have done such a thing. He knew that she would half guess the truth and knew just as well that he did not want to tell her more. Telling even a part would lead to telling all, and he wasn't yet prepared to do that. They continued to ride through sunny days and clear nights. It was early autumn, and though the weather grew milder the further south they rode, their blankets and each night's fire provided welcome warmth. Evie could not know, of course, that the capital lay to the north and east of them, that they were moving farther from it every day. 3 nights after they had crossed the river, they camped in a grassy clearing. Zack felt drowsy and comfortable. He had managed to catch 2 fish that afternoon, and he and Evie had eaten both of them. Crickets and new insects chirped in the trees. The night air in this part of the district was moist and heavy. I miss your lyre, said Evie. So do I, said Zack. He leaned back with his hands behind his neck, and he watched the stars appear. Zack? Yes. Why won't you tell me the truth? For a beat, Zack was silent. He didn't look at the girl, but kept his gaze fixed on the dark sky above him. I haven't lied to you, he said at last. It can be a lie to tell only part of the truth, she said. He looked at her now, sitting cross-legged against the tree. The fire was burning low, and he saw that she was gazing at him calmly and openly. For the first time, he realized that she was not, after all, a child, but a nearly mature young woman. He couldn't think what to say to her, and after a moment she spoke again. We're not going to the capital, are we? He spoke slowly and with relief. No, we're not. So that's why you left your things at the camp all those days ago. You wanted the principal to think something had happened, so he won't look for us. Yes, said Zack, wondering what else to add, how much to tell her, how to explain what he had decided. When she was nursing him back to health, but perhaps he had unconsciously made the decision even before that, on the day he had reluctantly agreed to travel to the remote part of the district where Evie's family lived. What will happen if he finds us, she asked. He won't find us, said Zack. Don't worry. Don't say that, she said. That's all my parents told me the whole week before you came to our house. Ah, Evie, let me put it his way, then. I don't intend to be caught, not by the principal or anyone. And as long as I'm with you, I promise that I won't let anything happen to you. How long will you be with me? Until I know that you are safe and happy. She did not speak again for several moments. Then, will you tell me where we're going? The name of the place wouldn't mean anything to you, but it is where I grew up. I'm very sure that you'll like it and the people there. When will we get there? In 2 or 3 days at the most. What will we do then? Again, Zack hesitated. I don't know, he said at last. I have an idea, but I haven't made up my mind. I'm not lying or hiding anything from you. I just don't know yet. The only thing he did know for certain was that he could not stay at the garden, nor could he ever return to the capital. Evie sighed. All right, she said, accepting his answer for the moment. Between them was the knowledge that she had not yet asked the most important question. Why? Now that the decision had been made and uttered, there was no reason to delay, and the next day they rode hard and long. Zack was sure that the girl was as tired as he of constantly living off the land and daily search for clear water and food. The animals and insects everywhere. Besides, he felt a growing excitement at the thought of returning to the garden for however short a period. For the first time in nearly 20 years. The remainder of the journey took just under 3 days. From the evening Zack had admitted the truth to Evie, though they often passed the time by talking as before. Evie seemed unusually quiet, lost in her thoughts, and not even once did she mention the capital or the principal. When they approached the large, shallow lake, which lay near the garden, at first Zack didn't recognize it, but as they turned onto the narrow path by the shore, he realized where he was. I used to fish in this lake when I was a boy, he said. Evie caught his excitement. When will we get there? I'd say by nightfall, or at the worst early morning. It's just across on the far side of the lake. But as they continued to follow the lake south, the path abruptly ended, disappearing into a soupy marsh. Either a stream had changed course, or more likely men or animals had dammed one. Looks as if we'll have to take a detour, Zack said, feeling unreasonably disappointed. Now that he was almost there, he didn't want to wait another minute. He turned his mount and began skirting the swampland. It was large, and no path was cleared. The area alongside was treacherous, and he rode into the woods some way to avoid it. Look, said Evie. She pointed to a low, narrow wooden bridge, which seemed to lead across the swamp. Beyond it was a red dirt road. Zack turned his mount onto the bridge. Once crossed it, he was about to lead back towards the lake when a man's voice cried out, "Halt!" Zack reined in. Who are you? A short, stout man with a ruddy face and graying hair stood by the path. He was dressed in skins, and on his head was a cap made from the fur of a fox cat. You've used our bridge, he said. Now pay the toll. Zack was disgusted. The man had no right to collect tolls. Such things belonged only to the principal. But in a region of the district as ill-patrolled as this, enterprising men could get away with anything their imagination devised. How much, he asked, deciding to pay rather than risk confrontation. 2 pieces of metal for you, and 2 for your rider. 4 altogether. I guess metal is really important. 44. That's outrageous. I'll pay nothing. Get out of my way. Zack started to turn the mount past the little man. Not so fast. Now another man, much taller than the first, nearly as big as Zack himself, stepped onto the road. He was holding a crossbow, its bolt aimed at Zack. The small man had swiftly pulled out a knife and held it in a throwing position. Zack sighed. All right, he said. He reached into his boot and removed 4 metal coins and flung them to the ground. Take your Dina cursed toll, he said. The 2 men exchanged glances. Then the first one shook his head. Sorry, stranger, he said. You should have paid when we first asked. The price just went up. Feeling sick, Zack realized that both of the men were now staring not at him, as he had first thought, but just in front of him. What my brother means, said the tall man, is that we want the girl. Chapter 6. Zack hesitated. The big man ahead of him was blocking the road, while the other cut off retreat to the bridge. If he had been alone, he would have turned his mount quickly into the wood, but didn't dare take the risk with Evie vulnerable in front of him. "Throw down your weapons," said the little man. "You're making a dangerous mistake," said Zack. "You'll make a bigger one if you don't do what I say." Zack lifted his sword and knife free from his belt and dropped them. Then he spoke again in a commanding tone. "I am Zack, delegate of the principal. If anything happens to me or my daughter, you will be very sorry." The highwaymen exchanged glances. Then the smaller one spoke again. "Get off your mount," he said. He had drawn a sword and approached. Zack dismounted, and the little man moved between him and the mount. "Orin," he said, "take the girl." The large man put down his bow and reached for Evie, but the mount whistled in alarm and reared, baring her teeth. "Zack!" cried Evie, gripping the animal's mane. "Hold on," said Zack. Then to the men, "The mount won't let anyone near her. That she doesn't know." "Evil-tempered beast," muttered Orin, backing off. "Take her off the mount," the little man told Zack. "Now." Reluctantly, Zack swung Evie down, while the mount continued to whistle in alarm. Zack put a hand on the beast's head and stroked it to calm her, then tethered her loosely to a nearby tree. He did this slowly, trying to think. He knew his best chance was to maintain the bluff he had begun to establish himself as a man used to commanding authority. He turned back to the highwayman. "I'm a delegate of the principal, traveling on official business," he said. He showed his seal ring. There were very few such rings in the district. With this present state of technology, they were impossible to counterfeit. "It looks genuine," admitted the little man. "What sort of business do you have in this remote area?" Taking a chance, Zack went on. "I'm an emissary to the leaders of the garden. You may know of me. The place across the lake, we trade with them sometimes, but to tell you the truth, we're no more afraid of the garden than we are of the principal. Laws ain't too important out here." "Laws are important everywhere," said Zack. "Without them, men become beasts." The small man shrugged. "Even beasts have to make a living." Zack took a moment to control his anger, then spoke again. "You seem to be sensible men. Take the medal I gave you and let me go on. I won't report this." The highwayman's eyes narrowed. "Can you give me one good reason why we shouldn't just down you in the swamp and take the girl?" Zack sensed he was losing any small advantage he had. "The penalties for girl stealing," he began. "Death by machine, yes. Neither of us want to die that way. Well, you know as well as we do that the chances ain't good we'd ever be caught." "Don't be too sure," said Zack. "A contingent of the principal's men is riding a few hours behind us." The brothers again exchanged glances. "I see no reason to believe you, or not to believe you, stranger," the small man said. I'm going to have to end it here. We've been reading from Pandora's Genes. If you like this content, then make sure you like and subscribe, and ring the bell so you know when I upload. And if you want to support me in any way, all that information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.